Gridiron 360 in the house. What's up, Dave?
What's going on?
I'm Bill. We are talking 2020 NFL draft prospects. We are still in the Southeastern Conference. Today, we're going to talk about some of the big uglies. Some of the hog mollies. Offensive line. We'll probably start from the outside and work our way in. Prospect-wise, we don't want to keep these too long, so we'll dice it up as so. But, well, let's dive right in. How about that?
Do it.
All right, there's two guys right here that you could pretty much intermingle depending on what the team sees in them, how they grade out on these interviews over the phone or over the computer. But there's really two guys right here. The third guy we talked about in Becton from Louisville when we did our ACC cast. The other two of the really with him top three offensive linemen that are being projected are.
I'd go four. Let's not forget about Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, which we have not discussed yet.
Yep.
I would say these four, with the fifth, in fairness, kind of being the other tackle from Georgia. So I would almost, but
So
really those
four,
top four,
those
top four are kind of
Becton,
switching who's number one.
We haven't gotten
a
to Big Ten, and when
Yeah.
we will, we'll talk about Tristan Wirfs, the tackle out of Iowa, who's a man. But from the SEC, the other two. So you're right, four. So if you give these two, you got Mr. Jedrick Willis, offensive tackle from Alabama.
Wills.
And you got Mr. Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from Georgia. So let's start with Bama.
All right.
Jedrick Willis from Kentucky. He's a junior. Again, he's an offensive tackle at Alabama. 6'4", 312, 34 and a fourth-inch arms, 10-inch hands. This guy's a beast. Ran a little over 5 seconds in the 40. Offensive lineman, that's pretty decent. I mean, you're not going to see freaks like Becton all over the board running.
What did Becton run again? Do you
know,
remember?
Something silly, like 4.8 or something.
Okay.
Something ridiculous. But anyways, this is a guy who came out of high school as a five-star prospect, joined the team joined Alabama in 2016, and was able to play 11 games his first season. So he's been a consummate starter role player I would say more than role player, offensive tackle for the Tide. And you're talking about in a time when the Alabama Crimson Tide offense during his time there had changed tremendously. Okay, at this time Tua's coming in, the offense was way more high-powered than it had been years previous. Yep. I say that to say is that in my mind that puts a lot more responsibility on an offensive tackle, on the offensive line in general. But a guy like Tua, who moves around, flushes himself out of the pocket, having that innate sense of blocking for a guy like that when he's getting out and maintaining blocks and giving him spaces, it can be tough. It can be tough. You really have to have like this, again, innate is the word I use, synergy, because, you can't just turn around and look and see where Tua's going. He's got to just know, right?
Yep.
So a lot of people compare him to Mr. Jason Peters from the Philadelphia Eagles. Talk to me a little bit about Jedrick because, my New York Giants draft at 4, though I'd love them to take Isaiah Simmons. We do need offensive line. I don't want to take an offensive lineman at 4. It's too early even for someone as great as, a guy like this. But there is the potential with the teams around us for us potentially to drop back, accumulate, and then take a guy like this. I would feel a little bit better if that's the case. I do want Isaiah, though. But that being said, who am I looking at here, Mr. Dave, and Jedrick Willis? I mean, we talked about Becton. I like him. But what about this guy?
Well, what's interesting about him, and mind you, he's probably not listed as the number one tackle off the board. And the reason being, I would think, this guy's, if you remember Tua, what's special about Tua compared to other quarterbacks? Which hand does he throw with?
The southpaw.
Yeah, so this is actually
The
a guy.
left.
He has played his entire career at right tackle. Okay? better known as a pass blocker, but understand that's the blind side
Right.
pass
It's
blocking
like
tackle.
typically a left tackle type role, but because he's a southpaw,
Yep.
or the quarterback's a southpaw, like he rolls in right tackle, it's pretty much playing the role.
Yeah, so it is kind of interesting, how does his question's going to be, how does he fit? Because when you think about traditional right tackles, you think of more expectation of them to be a little bit more in the running game. So, being a little stronger in the run and a little less in the pass, it's just a traditional thing in the NFL. But he played the opposite role. Now, playing all 4 years or 3 years, I think he was a 3-year guy, on the right side, if you put him in and he's a pass blocker and you put him in for a traditional right-handed passer, you kind of change the dynamic of what this guy has been doing.
Right.
And so what could be interesting about him is, remember that Miami has 3 picks. And if they do happen to get Tua, does a pass blocking right tackle make a lot of sense for them? I think that's going to be a little bit of the interesting part with this is, what is the value in what you've had to see out of him? I'm trying to think who's a left-handed slinger in the NFL now. I'm trying to think of somebody. It's got to be a couple.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
But as far as starters go, so kind of the fit is probably going to be his challenge, and I think that's why you're seeing an Andrew Thomas and a Mekhi Becton, because they are left side tackles, played on the left side, and we're pass blocking for right-handed quarterbacks.
Right.
So that fit is going to be a little bit interesting to see, how do teams view that. So it could be something worth watching. He's very talented. He in his last year in particular made a big step forward in his blocking, particularly in the pass blocking. So I think that's something to look at. Now, understand he is a good run blocker as well. So this is a guy that, a lot of people thought had, I would say, pre-combine, probably maybe in between the title game and probably before we started really talking about draft potential, this was a guy that was looked at as potentially the most talented. If all else fails, he does have the ability probably to move inside with his size. Because one of the things, remember, we mentioned with Mekhi Becton was he really was the only freakish sized.
Yeah, he's a freak.
Most of the other guys are in that 6'5" range, in between 315 and 325. So those guys could potentially, you obviously don't want this. You're looking for an outside guy for the future, especially in the first round, but could kick inside and become effective players. Again, not what anybody's hoping for, but Becton is good. Would have struggle at 6'7", 345 pounds.
Squeezing
moving him into guard would be awful.
Shorter,
his bend would be a
He's
problem.
shorter than him, maybe your average tackler, but this is a nasty guy, man.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy plays with a chip on his shoulder. I've seen him just run over people in run blocking schemes. He's got a great base, very strong, he's got like the athleticism to hang with some of those freakish athletic DNs that might have kind of basketball type bodies. And I've seen him when somebody's trying to run stunts, him be able to recover very well, pick up the stunt. If he loses a little bit of balance, he's got enough power and his good feet to recover that balance. I guess, a few of the things that may be negative is sustaining blocks. Ken, once he gets his hand on somebody, is holding that block without it being an actual holding penalty. I mean, I don't, you're talking, Alabama typically has some really good linemen come out. And like I had said at the beginning of this is a different Alabama offense than we've seen in past years. Now, maybe last year the same, but like prior to Tua getting there. And this guy's coming out under that regime, so a little more versatile than I feel like I've seen out of Alabama tackles in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if you look at the guy physically, not that he looks light up top, but he is well put together and has a very good base. So, and he has shown the ability, which is, again, you think about some of these blocking schemes that people are running, is that he has the ability to get to the second level on the blockers, which is extremely important if, you're in some of the offensive schemes they run to be athletic. So,
actually, one of the, on NFL.com, on his combine draft profile, they list the strength as moves like a tight end in space to adjust to moving targets.
There you go.
To your point.
Yeah, and let's not just kid ourselves. He's got, you kind of touched on it already, he's got a pedigree. He's with a winning program. Like you said, he doesn't, I don't know if I would call it a mean streak, but he definitely plays through the whistle. Like he plays hard. He, there are little tweaks to his game that he'll need to work on, but overall, like he's day one starter ready, I think, on most offensive lines that you're coming into. At least anybody that's going to invest a first-round pick in him.
Sure. Yeah, I think he's definitely going to go in the first round.
I'd agree.
Where I think remains to be seen. He could go, I think, maybe as early as somewhere around that 10 slot, but I think he'll be somewhere in the teens.
Probably lower teens, but yeah, teens would make sense.
Yep.
Maybe like a 13, 14, 15. Again, we got to look. I do think, and this is kind of the important part with this is, like anything else, there's always a chance for runs in certain positions. It projects right now that there's a possibility of some trading going on, more so probably than what we've seen, especially at the quarterback role, which, again, that starts to reshuffle the deck a little bit. So, we'll see what that plays out for. But certainly, I think tackles, I would think, God, there could be at least, I would say, solid 4 going in the first round would be my guess. And he would be one of them.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on to the next guy, and that's Mr. Andrew Thomas, the University of Georgia Bulldog. He is from Georgia. He's a junior. 6'5", 315, 36 and an 1/8 inch arms, 10 and a 4th hands, ran a 5.22 on the 40. This guy started for 3 years for the Dogs, and they were, I think, just about all 3 years, one of the best offensive line groups in the entire country for Division I college football, especially Power 5.
Yeah, I got to say, this guy is probably, I'd probably say the surest thing.
Yeah, in terms of consistency.
Yeah, he did not get beat very often. No. I saw some of his weaknesses on a few different sites looking at it. Just being that he gets a little bit, when he does get out of place, he gets a little, what was the word I saw at one time? Panicky. But the whole point is this guy does not get beat very often.
No.
Very, very sound in what he does.
Just like with his 40, I don't think he's necessarily as fleet of foot as some of the other guys, but his, he's a beast. So if he locks on to you, it's going to be trouble if you're a defender, but that might be a weakness if he has to adjust, getting his foot movement a little bit quicker to pick up some different blocks. And, this is a guy that played on, in both tackle spots while he was at Georgia. He played both sides. He can do both. I think coming into the NFL, it would behoove him to play, well, obviously you talk about, a southpaw and Tua, but most quarterbacks are right-handed. So to stick him right away at a left tackle spot, I think you have to have a serious need. But I could see him coming in at the non-blind side, the typical right tackle spot, maybe working his way over to the left in time.
Yeah, it's always tough for a young guy to come in and play. Because you're going to catch, as a rookie, you're going to catch the best pass rushers, and especially on the left side. Nowadays, though, with some of the more athletic pass rushers, they're moving. They're not sticking to one side of the field. But if you happen to get that guy, he's generally playing on your side. I don't know. I think this guy could be a contributor. There's really, what you mentioned, that he's not fast, but what he is he's very, he's got very quick feet. He knows how to punch and push you off your balance.
That's where we differ. That's
Yeah,
what I
well-
said. I think his foot quickness could leave a little bit to be desired, but it's okay if we differ.
All right. Well, I'm not sitting here breaking down hours and hours of tape, but there are some trusted people that kind of have agreed with what I've said. Not that there aren't people that agree with what you said. So again, I'm trying to take some of that, but let me just say this: I've watched the guy play,
Yeah.
and I don't see Fromm get pasted from the blind side at all. And this is not a mobile quarterback.
Look,
and not only that, he had probably what we think is probably the number one running back coming out of there. And again, it's a 5-man unit, so it's fair to to say that there's other guys involved, but just a guy. I mean, again, you just don't see that happen. And I won't call Fromm a statue by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not athletic. So you have got to be able to move guys. His pocket awareness, Fromm stays tight in the pocket, which allows him to push guys back. It might be interesting to see him play with a more mobile quarterback. Maybe that changes some of that.
I think it's a guy that could start right out the gate. He's going to go in the first round. I think he'll start right out the gate.
Yeah, he could easily be top 10, probably in the second half of the top 10, just because I think quarterback might run a little bit. But good.
This is a guy I think that's very coachable. I think where I feel he's not as fleet of foot, his technique is pretty darn sound, and that can make up for a lot of deficiencies when you're talking about speed or quickness on an offensive lineman.
Yep.
He's got good technique, able to recover at times where he slips up. Well, I think that's day one starter to me. That's what you need.
And at 6'5", 320, which is kind of the last listing of him, there's room to add a little bit of weight. I don't think he needs to put on a ton, but that's kind of the good thing. The rigors of the NFL season, sometimes these guys need to hit the gym a little bit harder to have their bodies stand up. So, I don't know, just kind of an interesting thing that I just think he's got that move. If he would have been more like 6'4", 6'3", it's a little bit tougher. 6'5", there's still, I think, some room to grow on him. But he's, again, like we're talking about these guys in the first round. All of these guys we're going to talk about early on from any conference that we talk about round one are going to have a good base. And you're going to start nitpicking some of their stuff because the fact of the matter is you have to, because when you're going up against guys like Von Miller and Khalil Mack, and you just got some beasts out there, and so that's going to be where these guys are going to get tested.
Sure. Well, I mean, I told you, like, he ran 5.22 in the 40, and we just talked about Willis that ran 5.05. But if you break it down even further, because the 40 doesn't really tell me much for a lineman.
Sure.
I'm looking more for the 3-cone and the shuttle drills. So if you look at his 20-yard shuttle, he ran a 4.66, and Willis ran a 4.84. So, and that's really, I don't have a comparison on 3-cone between the two of them, but that's really, the more of telling to me, moving quickly.
You're not running 40 yards downfield.
Right.
And especially when you're heavy, you can lose steam in the last 20 yards, but you're not doing that very often.
That's right. So, but I do believe both these guys. I don't know. A lot of people have talked about my Giants taking them at 4. I would not like it. Again, if we're going to take a lineman, we need to trade back and get one because, quite frankly, I think we can. That we're just reaching at that point. We didn't even try at 4 to go get a lot to trade back. But both these guys will be going in the first round.
Yep.
So, all right, let's move on to the next.